Hey guys, tonight we descend into the depths of the underworld. Yeah, that underworld where things are unusually chaotic. Picture this. Sulphurous mist curling around your feet, the air thick with the scent of burnt cinnamon and old iron, and dead souls just sort of milling around awkwardly because their terrifying gatekeeper is, get this, missing. Yep, Cerberus, the infamous three-headed dog who guards the gates of Hades, has vanished like someone left the netherworld's back door wide open. Hades is not taking this well. You wouldn't either if your only reliable employee with teeth in triplicate suddenly went AWOL. He's stomping around in his heavy bronze sandals, which are definitely not OSHA-approved, muttering under his breath in ancient Greek, something about loyalty and performance evaluations. His toga is wrinkled, his beard slightly more flammable than usual, and the river Styx has started backing up with newly dead folks who were supposed to be, sorted. You probably won't survive this bureaucratic nightmare if it goes on too long. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is. Always curious who's up with me at this ungodly hour. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step carefully through the underworld's outer ring, brushing past a confused shade who insists he was promised eternal bliss, not a 6-hour wait behind a talking skeleton. There's no barking, no growling, not even the usual drool puddles Cerberus leaves in his wake. Hades stands near the blackened gates, his helmet of invisibility tucked under one arm, eyebrows doing most of the shouting. Find my dog. He hisses, with the barely contained rage of someone who has already torn up half his throne room looking for chew toys. This is where you come in. Not because you're qualified, not because you have any prior monster tracking experience, but because literally no one else will volunteer, and Thanatos called in sick again. Typical. You grab a torch, which screams a little when lit, because, ambience, and start your search. The first stop is Cerberus' usual nap spot, a patch of scorched obsidian near the shore of Lethe. It smells like burnt marshmallows and disappointment. No dog, no bones, just a single, suspiciously nibbled sandal. Historians still argue whether that's Hades or just from one of the newer arrivals. You mumble, hoping it's not the latter. Dead people don't take kindly to losing footwear. You pass the black pool of Acheron, where shades float lazily, mostly just reliving their worst moments in grainy grayscale. You ask around. One soul claims she saw a big dog chasing butterflies made of fire. You thank her politely and write possibly hallucinating in your mental notebook. Then something catches your eye. A trail of scorched paw prints, 3 sets, perfectly aligned, disappearing behind a crumbled pillar near the fields of punishment. You creep closer, half expecting a jump scare, but no, it's just a tiny note stuck to the wall. Written in smudged charcoal, it reads, BRB, sniffing stuff. See, you show it to Hades. He squints at the handwriting like it's a betrayal of penmanship more than protocol. I knew I shouldn't have let Hermes teach him how to write, he grumbles. Turns out Cerberus has been experimenting with independence. No leash, no orders, just a full-blown underworld sabbatical. The gods never really taught him boundaries. There's a fringe theory among demigod scholars, yes, that's apparently a thing, that Cerberus can enter dreams when he's bored. So while his body's wandering, his essence might be playing fetch in your nightmares. Comforting thought. You circle back toward the Elysian fields, where the more upbeat dead lounge in eternal luxury. Harps are strumming. Birds are singing, the sickeningly pleasant. Still no dog. Suddenly, a breeze stirs the long grasses. Yes, there's wind in the underworld, don't ask questions, and carries a whiff of something oddly familiar. Wet fur and undercooked steak. You follow your nose. Behind a statue of Orpheus mid-serenade, you find a tuft of midnight black fur clinging to a thorn bush. It's damp, it's fresh, and it growls at you. That's right, the fur growls. because apparently Cerberus shed part of himself, and it's now semi-sentient. You stare at it for a full minute before deciding this is above your pay grade. You scoop it up anyway because you have zero boundaries, and Hades is still watching you from his balcony like a brooding gothic dad. Mainstream myth says Cerberus is tied to the river Styx, guarding the entrance and snarling at anyone not on the list. But there are whispers, quirky scrolls banned from the Library of Delphi, that claim he sometimes wanders off to commune with the spirits of extinct animals. Why? Unknown. Maybe he's working through some emotional stuff. 3 heads, 3 times the feelings. You find more signs. A trail of scorch marks zigzags through the asphodel fields. Discarded bones, some ceremonial, some clearly stolen from Hades' collection, lie scattered like a twisted breadcrumb trail. Then you see it. A claw mark etched deep into the stone. Not just a scrape, but a full paw-shaped crater. Whatever Cerberus is chasing, it's not just butterflies anymore. Behind you, a voice whispers, "The nymphs did it." You whirl around. No one there. Just the ghost of a toga and the unsettling feeling that things are about to get more ridiculous. You spin slowly, half expecting a trickster god to pop out of the shadows with a smug grin and a riddle that ends in an existential crisis. But it's just more gloom, more echoing silence, and that slowly sinking feeling that the whisper wasn't entirely imagined. You jot down nymphs in the mental margins, underlined twice. Now, nymphs, those nature spirits of Greek myth, aren't your usual suspects for kidnapping a 3-headed hellhound. They're mostly known for lounging around fountains, braiding flowers into their hair, and occasionally luring shepherds into watery doom. But Greek myths are nothing if not inconsistent. And Cerberus is, well, he's technically part of nature, just the kind that eats intruders. You ask a few loitering souls if they've heard anything strange, besides the usual wailing. One shade, with hair like spun cobwebs and a toga 2 centuries out of fashion, nods solemnly and points toward the grove of the silver pomegranate. "That's where they dance," she whispers, "when the moonlight smells like olives and bad decisions." You don't know what that means. You don't think she knows what that means, but it's the best lead you've got. As you trudge across brittle earth toward the grove, you can't help but notice the atmosphere shifting. The temperature drops. Not a full chill, but enough to make your skin prickle. The shadows grow thicker, the kind that seem to lean toward you instead of away. Hades' realm is never welcoming, but here it feels cautious, like the landscape is holding its breath. The trees are twisted silver, bark slick as wet stone, and their leaves shimmer faintly, even in the absence of light. The grove hums with an energy that's neither living nor dead, just sort of inconveniently magical. A giggle, faint, high-pitched, and entirely unhelpful. You freeze. Out from behind one of the trees darts a figure. Small, quick, glowing faintly around the edges like a bad dream about glitter. A nymph, or at least something trying very hard to look like one. She tilts her head. "You're looking for the dog." You nod, hoping she can't smell your confusion, or fear, or the undercooked lentils you had before starting this nightmare. Another nymph appears, this one with hair made of curling smoke and fingers that end in little blossoms. He came through here, big fella, drooly, ate half the hedge maze. You ask if they've seen him recently. They exchange glances. Then maybe not. What's it worth to you? This is why you don't negotiate with feyfolk, even the low-tier Greek kind. You offer what little you have. A piece of ambrosia gum, probably expired. A bronze coin, probably fake. And a promise that if Cerberus doesn't come home, the entire underworld's plumbing system is going to back up and everyone's going to smell it. They wince. Apparently even nymphs dislike sewage. They finally point you toward the back of the grove, where a shallow pool reflects nothing at all. No trees, no sky, just a dark, inky void. "He went in there," one says, "looking for someone, or something. He was humming." You blink. "Humming? Yeah? She nods. 3 voices, all out of tune. Mainstream myth says Cerberus is unmusical. Too many throats, not enough rhythm. But one surviving vase painting shows him dancing. A bizarre little pirouette near a temple. Historians still argue whether that's symbolic or just a bored potter with a sense of humor. You stare into the pool. It doesn't ripple, doesn't even look wet. You toss in a pebble. Nothing. Then a blink, blink, like the surface has eyelids. You step in. Instant cold. Not water, not air, just pressure, like you're being hugged by a giant ghost octopus with boundary issues. Your ears pop. Your thoughts slow. The nymphs vanish behind you, and then you're standing in a forest. Not the underworld anymore. Not quite. It's brighter here, but the colors are wrong. Too vivid. Greens that shouldn't exist. Mushrooms the size of coffee tables. Trees that seem to lean in slightly, like they're eavesdropping. And in the middle of it all, Cerberus. He's sitting, calm, tongues lolling, eyes half closed, like he's just had a spa day and maybe a cup of herbal tea. Around him are tiny creatures, nymph-like, yes, but made entirely of moss and echo. They're braiding daisies into the fur behind his left ear. He sees you. All 3 heads tilt. You wave. He doesn't move. This is the part where logic gives up. You call his name, not that it ever worked before, but hope is free. One head barks. The others sigh. A moss nymph walks up to you. No legs, just floats. He came here on purpose, she says. Looking for the old forest. The first one. Before Olympus. Before names. You raise an eyebrow. He's a dog. She shrugs. A very old dog. And here's the fringe detail. Some obscure texts from forgotten monasteries claim Cerberus wasn't created by the gods, but inherited. That before Hades, he guarded something else. Something older. Historians still argue whether he's a beast of Olympus or something borrowed. You look at Cerberus. He seems content. But behind those sleepy eyes, there's movement, thought, maybe even sadness. You ask if he's coming back. The nymph's answer is maddeningly vague. Only if he wants to. You sit beside him. The moss nymphs offer you tea, flavored like memory and slightly burnt toast. You sip. You wait. After a while, the middle head nudges your shoulder. Progress. You stretch your legs, unsure how long you've been here in this surreal forest where time wobbles like overcooked jelly. Cerberus lets out a chuff, one of those full-bodied. Not quite a bark, not quite a sigh, sounds that rattles the nearby mushrooms. The nymphs scatter with giggles, melting into the moss like they were never there to begin with. Cerberus is still staring. 3 heads, 6 eyes, all different kinds of doggy thoughtfulness. Left head, cautious. Middle head, sleepy. Right head, probably dreaming about chewing on the bone of some forgotten philosopher. You clear your throat. So, you're not kidnapped? The middle head sneezes. That's as close to an answer as you're getting. It's slowly dawning on you that this whole situation might be less about crime and more about a metaphysical timeout. A divine dog break. Everyone needs one, even hellhounds. But Hades doesn't do ambiguity. The god of the dead operates on schedules, rules, systems. When you don't return Cerberus promptly, he'll assume foul play. And when Hades assumes foul play, mountains crumble, crops wither, and paperwork quadruples. You explain this to Cerberus. The right head tilts just a smidge. A dog's way of saying continue. So you launch into the full spiel. You tell him about the underworld chaos, the jammed soul cues, the ghost rebellion forming in the Department of Lost Limbs. How even Sharon the boatman has started demanding hazard pay. You paint the whole picture in agonizing, overly detailed brushstrokes. The left head yawns. Loudly, frustrated, you try a new tactic. Look, if you don't come back, Hades is going to blame the nymphs. That gets a growl. A deep, echoing rumble from all 3 throats at once. Apparently, someone still remembers the last time the nymphs got blamed for something. An incident involving Dionysus, 3 barrels of immortal wine, and a temple that now only exists on alternate Tuesdays. Cerberus stands. Slowly, a tree shudders. Somewhere in the distance, a deer-shaped cloud faints. He pads toward the shimmering not-quite pond, then stops, looks back. All 3 heads blink at you. You realize he's waiting. You step into the dark, waterless portal again. That same pressure returns, like you've been hugged by a sentient duvet soaked in carbonated milk. There's a faint popping sound, and then you're back in the grove of the silver pomegranate. Just you, no Cerberus. You whirl around, confused, but the pool is still, silent, unmoving. Behind you, a familiar voice sighs. Lost him again? It's Hades. Yes, the god himself. Draped in shadows, face obscured by a hood that seems to shift in shape depending on where you look. His robes swish like dry leaves and bureaucracy. You try to explain again. About the forest, the moss nymphs, the braided daisies. He nods once, as if this is not only believable, but irritatingly familiar. He does this every few centuries, Hades mutters. Goes off to some dimension where time has no meaning and the plants speak in riddles. It's how he decompresses. Have you considered a squeaky toy? You suggest. Hades doesn't laugh. You didn't expect him to, but you still feel the sting. He starts walking. You follow, because one simply doesn't ignore a god who wears regret like cologne. As you stroll, Hades talks, not to you but into the void, which you're learning is his preferred audience. Cerberus was never just a guard dog. He's a symbol, the last barrier between what's dead and what refuses to stay that way. You nod sagely, also good at fetch. Historians still argue whether he's a metaphor or a leftover. That catches your attention. Leftover. Hades pauses, considers. From before us, the Titans had things they didn't tell us about. Creatures that weren't bound by death or time or myth. Cerberus might be one of them. Well, that would explain the dreamy jazz forest vacation. You arrive back at the edge of the underworld's main corridor, a place that looks suspiciously like a DMV built inside a haunted castle. Ghosts in line, spectral clerks, a minotaur arguing with a spreadsheet. Hades stops, looks at you for the first time. I'll retrieve him, he says, but not yet. He deserves the rest. You open your mouth to object, but he cuts you off. Your task now is to find out why he left, not just where. You blink. Isn't that your job? A rare smile flickers across his lips, like a thundercloud thinking about clearing up. I'm delegating. Then he's gone. You're left standing in a hallway full of phantoms and red tape, wondering how you got promoted from ghost herder to myth investigator. Still, it beats answering phones. A shade floats by holding a sign that says, "Where's the dog?" in 6 languages. You sigh. Time to find some very old scrolls, talk to some very unreliable oracles, and maybe bribe a satyr. This is going to take a while. You start with the most reasonable course of action available to someone stuck between the divine HR department and a semi-feral magical bloodhound. You head to the archives. Now, these aren't your average public library archives with neatly labeled microfiche drawers and that one librarian who silently judges you from behind her bifocals. No, the underworld archives are a place where the scrolls whisper when you're not looking. The books rearrange themselves out of spite, and one unfortunate intern once vanished into a filing cabinet labeled Existential Ennui, Volume 3. The hallway to the archives is lit by flickering will-o'-the-wisps, which are technically fire, but also technically former philosophers, so they tend to interrupt your thoughts with helpful but unsolicited commentary. One floats past your ear now, murmuring something about the futility of narrative structure. You ignore it. You reach the main chamber, where the Keeper of Forgotten Footnotes resides. She's a shade with 6 arms, all of which are currently shelving cursed index cards. Her name is Persephone, not that Persephone, but a cousin twice removed and significantly more enthusiastic about archival systematics. Looking for something? She chirps, not looking up. Yeah, Cerberus. Why he might leave. She pauses. All 6 arms freeze in perfect unison. Slowly, she turns, eyes glowing faintly lavender. Oh, she says. You're on that assignment. You nod. There's a scroll, she says. Old, pre-Hades, possibly pre-language. But it mentions the watchdog. You follow her deeper into the stacks, down a spiral staircase made entirely of unreturned library books. Eventually, she pulls out a scroll so dusty it practically exhales cobwebs. The title? On the Beast That Guards the Threshold. You open it gingerly. The writing isn't Greek or Latin or even a decipherable pictograph. It's more like the paper feels what it wants to say and sort of imprints it into your bones. You get flashes, images. Cerberus younger, just 1 head, then 2, then 3. Not an evolution, more like adaptation. You see ancient creatures, not gods, not humans. Older things, wild, angry, beautiful. They roam between realms like they own them, and maybe they do. Then the flash shifts. Cerberus, curled around something glowing, something hurt. The nymphs watching, whispering. And finally, you see him leave the gate. Not fleeing, not chasing, searching. You blink. The scroll crumbles softly in your hands, turning to dust as if it had said what it needed to say and no longer saw the point of continuing. Historians still argue whether this account refers to the actual Cerberus, Persephone says quietly, or some earlier version of him, or if it's all symbolic dream babble. But you think it's real. She shrugs. Real enough to make Hades twitch. You thank her and begin the long walk back through the corridors. Scroll dust still clinging to your skin like regret. Your thoughts keep circling back to the images, those pre-mythic beings, the injured glow thing, Cerberus with a single head. Why would a creature engineered or, let's be honest, grown to guard the gates of death just leave? Maybe he wasn't just guarding the gate from the dead. Maybe he was guarding us from something else. You arrive at the Ghost Bureau and tap on the glass pane of the soul-sorting kiosk. A cyclops in a pinstripe toga grunts at you. Looking for anyone in particular? Someone who remembers the first gate. The cyclops blinks. You sure? No. He shrugs and points you down a hallway that seems physically longer than should be possible. Time and geometry bend around you like overcooked noodles as you walk. Finally, you arrive at a cell. Not a prison, more like a containment bubble for something too opinionated to roam free. Inside floats an old soul. Not aged, just old. A former prophet, maybe, or a philosopher whose thoughts were banned for being too weird even by ancient standards. She peers at you through the haze. Cerberus, you say. Her smile is slow and haunting. He loved once. That's unexpected. A dog? You ask. A guardian, she corrects. A soul doesn't guard out of duty. It guards out of fear or love. So who or what did he love? She shrugs. A nymph, a creature, concept, doesn't matter. What matters is that something woke that ancient beast's heart. And now it's stirring again. You leave more confused than ever. You're starting to feel like you're chasing a ghost of a dog who may or may not be in emotional crisis. You plop down on a bench beside a restless river of molten moonlight, rubbing your temples. A passing spirit offers you a latte made from dreams. You accept it. It tastes like forgotten lullabies and slightly burnt popcorn. Somewhere above, a ripple moves through the metaphysical sky. Cerberus is still out there, not lost, not stolen, searching, and you have a growing suspicion that if you don't figure out what for, he might not come back at all. You stare into the latte for a little too long. The foam forms vague patterns, maybe mountains, maybe just your overactive imagination. It's hard to say anymore. Dreams brewed into beverages tend to do that. Blur the line between vision and hallucination with the subtlety of a harp played underwater. When you stand again, your limbs feel slightly more like yours. though a hint of moonlight clings to your hair. The search isn't over. It's barely begun. You still haven't spoken to the nymphs, those famously elusive, woodland-adjacent beings with a flair for cryptic responses and dramatic exits. You take the river route, quicker and only slightly more prone to existential drowning. The ferryman doesn't speak, but he does play a haunting tune on a bone flute as he rows. It's a melody you can't place, but it feels oddly like homesickness. Not yours, but someone's. As you drift, you review what you know so far. Cerberus left. He wasn't stolen, at least not in the classic big hook and smoke cloud sense. Something pulled him away, maybe metaphorically, maybe magically, and somehow nymphs are involved. You disembark at a quiet dock made of mist and regret. The forest here isn't made of trees so much as intentions. Tall, shifting columns of green-tinged possibility. Each tree seems to hum softly, as if thinking very hard about whether it should even be real today. You step carefully. Nymphs don't like loud approaches, unsolicited compliments, or being compared to dryads. There's etiquette here, part dance, part code. Eventually, a figure steps from the underbrush. She's made of summer twilight and judgmental eyebrows. Her expression says, "You're late, even though you weren't invited." "I'm looking for Cerberus," you say. "Of course you are," she replies. Her voice sounds like a breeze that used to sing lullabies but got tired of being soft. "Did he pass through here?" She tilts her head. "Did he leave paw prints made of shadow? Did he snarl at the night and make it flinch?" You blink. "I mean, yes. Then yes. He came." "Why?" She doesn't answer directly. Of course not. Instead, she walks and you follow. Through glades that smell like forgotten holidays and ponds that reflect your younger self instead of your current face. "He came for the songless one," she finally says. "Is that a nymph? A being? Once part of us, then not." She stopped singing, and the forest grieved. Why did she stop? Because the gods made a rule. That grief should not echo. You're not sure if this is metaphor or gossip, but either way, it makes your spine itch. So Cerberus came to help her? To remember with her. This is getting way too emotional for a story that started with a missing dog. But hey, myths are messy. Nobody warns you that ancient beasts can also have mid-eternity crises. Do you know where they went? The nymph stops walking. She points to a pool so still it might be solid. There. You lean closer. Beneath the surface, instead of water, is a swirl of moments. Cerberus curled beside a figure of soft light, neither moving, just existing, breathing together. She left the forest for him, the nymph says, and he left the gates for her. Why does Hades think you stole him? At this, the nymph finally smiles, a sad, writhing. Because gods don't understand leaving for something, only leaving against them. You sit with that for a while. The stillness of the pool is contagious. Your thoughts quiet one by one. Eventually, you ask, "Can I speak to her?" She only speaks through memory now. She's not gone, but she's not here either. Like a half-dream, like a whisper in your bones. You close your eyes, try to listen. Not with your ears, but with your chest. And there it is. Not words, not music, but something warm. Like a childhood blanket pulled from storage. Like remembering you used to be brave. "She's not just a being," you whisper. "She's an anchor." The nymph nods, and he guards her now. Not a gate. That changes everything. Cerberus isn't lost. He found something, but Hades doesn't know, or maybe doesn't want to understand. Gods are excellent at command structures, less so at emotional nuance. As you stand to leave, the nymph touches your arm. Tread gently. The gods fear what they cannot retrieve. You nod, stepping back onto the path, which somehow knows you better now. The leaves bow slightly as you pass. Back at the river, the ferryman is already waiting. He doesn't ask what you learned. He doesn't need to. He can see it in the way your shoulders have lowered, just a little, and how your steps no longer echo like questions. As he rose, you sip another dream latte. This one tastes like campfire smoke and a song you forgot you loved. You're not just tracking a dog anymore. You're tracing a love story that predates empires. And it's not over. The river narrows behind you, curling away like a loose thread pulled from the edge of something much older than fabric. You glide back toward the underworld's rim, but with new purpose now. Cerberus wasn't lost, he left. And not just left, chose to leave for a reason that didn't involve commands or chains. And yet, that doesn't resolve the problem. Because when gods feel slighted, they don't sit down with tea and unpack their feelings. They unleash plagues, or lightning, or passive-aggressive weather patterns that ruin crops and coastal economies. So now, you're walking back to Hades, but not to return Cerberus. You're walking back with the terrifying burden of context. The road is longer this time, though. The stones shift underfoot as if disagreeing with your pace. Ghosts lean against old columns and whisper half-facts, and at least 2 skeletons offer unsolicited relationship advice. Never date a muse, one says, jangling dramatically. They always want inspiration, but never stability. You're not sure if you're amused or deeply disturbed, but you wave politely anyway. When you arrive, Hades is sitting on his throne again. Less furious now, more broody. The god of the dead does sulking with operatic flair. Elbows on knees, jaw in palm, eyes casting metaphysical shade into the middle distance. Well, he says like he already hates whatever you're about to say. I found Cerberus. That makes him sit straighter, but he doesn't speak. Just gestures. He's not gone. He's changed roles. Silence. You hate silence from immortal beings. It tends to stretch too long and bend reality like overcooked spaghetti. He's guarding something else now, you say softer. Someone. Hades narrows his eyes. A someone who stole him. Not stole. Drew him. Semantics. Intent. That word hangs in the room. Heavy. Unwelcome. You describe the songless one. How she left the forest of nymphs, not in rebellion, but in grief. How Cerberus followed, not out of duty, but compassion. How they now sit in a quiet pocket of the world, not hiding, just healing. Hades listens, or at least his body does. His face, though, looks like it's deciding which part of you to turn into a slug first. Gods do not lose their dogs, he finally says. Maybe not, but they share them sometimes. He actually growls. You didn't know gods could growl in italics, but here we are. I did not send him there. No, you say, but maybe he sent himself. He stands now, all bone-white robes and fury restrained by bureaucracy. Do you know what it means when a guardian leaves his post? You nod. It means the post changed. This is the part you've been dreading, explaining emotional evolution to someone who still thinks offering pomegranates is a personality. He's still guarding, just not your gate. He's guarding her silence, her sadness. Hades flinches at that, not visibly, but something in the air shifts like a curtain moved behind a closed window. Historians still argue whether the gods ever had feelings. You say aloud, mostly to fill the silence, or whether they simply modeled them to manipulate mortals. Hades glares. Not me, obviously, you add. Historians, in sandals, with scrolls. He walks slowly down the dais, eyes locked on yours. You half expect the floor to open beneath you, or a dramatic lightning bolt to smite the nearest chandelier just for punctuation. But no, he stops in front of you. Do you think he'll return? He asks. The question is so quiet it takes a moment to register that it's real. Maybe, you say, if she ever finds her song again. He might come back when she no longer needs his silence. And if she never does, then he'll stay. The god of the dead looks down. For once, not to judge, but to think. Cerberus always returned before, he murmurs. You nod. Before wasn't now. And then something unexpected happens. Hades sighs. Not a dramatic gust of despair, just a small, very human exhale, like letting go of a grudge that was starting to give him back pain. "There will be gossip," he says. "There always is," you reply. "But you'll survive." You don't mean it as a joke, but it lands like one. His lip twitches, almost a smile. "I suppose," he says. He walks back toward the throne but doesn't sit. Instead, he waves a hand, and the room tilts slightly. You feel yourself pulled sideways, not unpleasantly, like being tucked into the folds of a different chapter. "You've done what you came to do," he says. "Leave, if you wish." You blink. That's it? No parting trials? No mystical riddle to decode? "Do you want one?" "No, thank you." And just like that, you're standing outside the gates again, with the path curling forward like an unrolled scroll. You glance back just once. The doors to the underworld don't creak. They breathe shut, quietly, like the end of a sentence you're not sure you heard right. So Cerberus isn't coming home. But maybe, just maybe, he's found something better. You walk on, toward a sky that no longer looks quite so overcast. You walk for what feels like several sleepy eons before the shadows thin, and the thread of your strange journey curls once more toward greener ground. The terrain shifts beneath your feet, from soot-colored stone to damp earth, to moss, to something altogether fluffier. You swear it's the texture of forgotten laundry. If laundry could hum softly with magic and smell faintly of time and ancient mythology. Up ahead, the forest thickens again. But this time, it's not the haunting, echo-filled gloom of the nymph's glade. This grove pulses with warm light and something almost maternal. Trees tilt as if listening. Leaves flutter, not from wind, but from mild interest. And right in the middle, because of course it's her, Persephone. You nearly trip on your own sense of occasion. Persephone, queen of the underworld, part-time hostage, full-time seasonal influencer, is sitting in a circle of wildflowers that bloom wherever she blinks. She doesn't look like someone whose husband just lost their three-headed dog. She looks like someone who's been expecting this moment and is already vaguely bored by it. You clear your throat. She looks up and tilts her head. Did he cry? You blink. Who? Hades. I wouldn't call it crying exactly. Did he sigh dramatically and retreat to his chamber of sulks? More or less. She grins. Progress. You laugh and it feels dangerous somehow, like giggling in a museum or sneezing in a temple. Still, she invites you to sit, and so you do, grateful that the moss rises subtly to support your back like memory foam woven by forest spirits. Persephone waves a hand, and a pomegranate appears in her palm. She doesn't offer it to you, which is probably a good thing. Instead, she speaks softly, with that dreamlike rhythm that makes it hard to tell whether you're in a conversation or a lullaby. "Cerberus didn't get lost," she says. "I know," you reply. "He went to find someone," she continues. "Someone the world forgot." You nod. "The songless one." Her expression falters. Just a flicker, like someone bumped a painting ever so slightly on its hook. "I remember her," she murmurs. "She used to bring me river-chilled nectar in the early days, when I was still pretending I'd get to go home." She stopped singing. "I heard." She was the last voice the nymphs had. When it fell silent, even Cerberus noticed. Persephone fingers the stem of her fruit like she's spinning memories between her nails. Hades never noticed her voice. He only notices silence when it inconveniences him. You raise an eyebrow. And yet, he did send me to find the dog, because losing Cerberus was an inconvenience, not a tragedy, that lands like a feather dipped in truth. It doesn't hurt, but it lingers. She looks at you again, this time more sharply. "And what do you think?" You pause. "I think Cerberus didn't run away. I think he ran toward something, and that scares gods more than it should." Persephone laughs, and it sounds like petals falling in reverse. "You'd make a terrible oracle. Too honest." Is that a compliment? Depends if you want to keep your bones. You smile. She sets the fruit aside, and now you notice the earth beneath her has begun blooming more aggressively. Little white flowers, fragile things that normally need starlight and sadness to grow, now crowd around her feet like eager students. I could bring her here, you say gently. The songless one stops in front of a smaller arch. Above it, the carving is simple, just a nymph sitting on a rock, braiding her hair. This is where it ends, she says. You glance around. Seems quiet. The truth doesn't always shout, she replies. Sometimes it just waits. She gestures for you to walk through the arch. You do, and on the other side, light. Not blinding, not divine, just soft like a daydream still under construction. And there, sitting in the center of the glade, is the third thread. No challenge.
No puzzle.
Just there. You frown. This feels like a trap, you murmur, but the songless one shakes her head. Not all myths need monsters. You step forward, pick up the thread. This one hums differently, less nostalgia, more potential. It feels like the moment before you realize something big, like standing on the edge of a what if. You bring it back to her, and she weaves it with the others. And then, slowly, carefully, she begins to sing. Not in words, not in sounds, really. It's more like she exhales memory, and the threads turn into vibration. The air shimmers. Even Cerberus sits very still. It's the lullaby, the real one, the myth of the sleeping mouth, whatever that is. You don't understand it exactly, but you feel something shift, something inside you, and outside you, and maybe in history itself. Can you hear it now? She asks gently. You nod. Hades looks at you. So, you going to forget all this when you wake up? Probably, you say, but you'll remember how it felt, the songless one says. And that's enough. Cerberus yawns. One head at a time. You look back the way you came. The market is gone. The arch has faded. All that's left is the melody, and the knowledge that you helped bring it back. The lullaby clings to your skin like fog. Soft, damp, not entirely pleasant, but strangely comforting. You're no longer walking. You're gliding, floating. Either way, your feet no longer touch the ground. Not that there's a ground anymore. The glade, the carvings, even the golden threads have all dissolved into something lighter than memory, but heavier than a dream. Where are we going? You ask, your voice sounding oddly muffled, as if spoken through layers of gauze. Hades shrugs. That depends on which version of the myth we're in. Cerberus trots ahead now, leading for once. His tails wag in different rhythms, like three very opinionated metronomes. The songless one keeps pace beside you, silent for the first time since you met her. Not ominously silent, more like the kind of hush that comes after an especially satisfying meal, or the moment between lightning and thunder. You found the three threads, she says at last. The truth is almost ready. You pause. Almost. There's still one thing missing. Of course there is. Closure. You sigh, floating through a corridor of unspoken endings. They look like doorways, hung in midair, each one labeled with stories you were too tired to finish. That one's from my junior year, you mutter, spotting an unfinished argument with a best friend. Another reads, that email you never sent to your high school crush. Cerberus sniffs at that one. Ignore it, you say quickly. Eventually, the corridor ends, and you drift into a room shaped like a spiral shell. In its center sits a small figure, hunched over a cracked lyre. The strings are made of hair, or maybe moonlight, and they buzz softly as the figure plucks at them. That's her, the songless one whispers, the nymph of unheard songs. You stare. The nymph is small, almost childlike. Her skin is translucent, her eyes milk glass blank. She plucks and plucks, but no sound comes out. She's the one who stole Cerberus? You ask.
No, Hades replies.
She's the one who called him. The nymph stops playing. Slowly, she lifts her head, and for the first time, sound leaks into the space. Just one note, pure and lonely, like a bird calling into an empty canyon. She was never trying to cause chaos, the songless one explains. She just wanted to be heard. You float closer. The nymph regards you, not angrily, not fearfully, just hopefully. You open your mouth to speak, but no words come. So instead, you sit beside her. You take the lyre gently in your hands, and you strum, one note, then another, and then her hands over yours, you both play, a duet of sorts, and the song that forms isn't loud or bold or destined for bards to memorize. It's gentle, melancholy, whole. Cerberus curls up beside you, eyes closing one by one. Hades leans against the spiral wall, arms crossed, expression unreadable. She called for comfort, you say softly, and Cerberus heard it. Exactly, the songless one nods. So, why did everyone think it was a theft? Because Hades sighs. It's easier to believe in a villain than a cry for help. You strum again, and this time, the room vibrates with warmth. The threads in your pocket dissolve into light, and the lullaby becomes part of the melody. You don't notice it right away, but your body starts to feel heavier. Not in a bad way, just grounded, like gravity remembered you exist. She's finished her song. The songless one murmurs. The nymph's fingers fall away. She smiles, and then, like the melody, she fades. Not gone, just dispersed. Into air, into myth, into the long list of things we almost remember when we wake up. Cerberus lifts one head lazily, yawns. Hades stands straighter. I suppose, he says, we should get you home. Do I still have to walk?
No.
He snaps his fingers. The spiral shell inverts. The corridor of unsent closures collapses inward. The walls around you ripple, then crack open like an egg. And suddenly, you're standing back at the mouth of the river Lethe. Home. The boat is waiting. Wait, you say, turning. What happens to the lullaby? It goes back, the songless one replies, to where it was lost, where someone else will find it someday. Hades steps forward, placing a cool hand on your shoulder. Or maybe, he says, it stays in you. You look down. The echo of the melody hums faintly in your chest. Sleep, Cerberus murmurs, all three heads in unison, and for once you listen. You lie back inside the boat, letting the lull of the river Lethe carry you, your limbs too heavy and warm to resist the gentle sway. Cerberus curls at your feet, still huge, still monstrous, but strangely cozy, like three weighted blankets that occasionally drool. Hades stands at the helm, using a staff carved from old regrets to steer you downstream. He hums under his breath. It's off-key. You don't tell him. Where exactly am I going now? You mumble, the edges of your vision curling inward like burning parchment. Not death, if that's what you're worried about, he says, chuckling. Though to be fair, some people do mistake deep REM for the sticks. You let that one slide. The songless one sits beside you, combing through your memories like they're knots in old yarn. You've got some really weird dreams stored in here, she mutters. One of them just involves a goat playing a kazoo on a mountain bike. Don't judge me. You drift past familiar sights now. Myths and fables painted onto the sky like cave drawings. There's Persephone gardening with a flamethrower. There's Narcissus filming a makeup tutorial in a pond. And there, just out of reach, is Sisyphus yelling at his boulder for ghosting him. Your eyelids droop. We're nearly to the source, Hades murmurs. The source? You want to ask what that means, but your lips have lost interest in forming consonants. Instead, the songless one leans closer. Do you remember how this all began? She asks. You blink. The memory forms slowly, like honey crystallizing in winter. It started with a lullaby. a forgotten tune, a three-headed dog, a nymph's silent plea. You didn't fix everything, she whispers, but you heard it. That's all some myths ask. The river narrows now. Trees lean in, branches dipped in silver, shedding leaves that hum as they fall. Each leaf lands on the water with a soft ping, adding itself to the melody still echoing faintly in your bones. You know, you say, voice slurred, Greek myths are way weirder than I remembered. Most people forget the boring bits. Hades shrugs. Like paperwork. There's so much underworld paperwork. Pause. Wait. Was this whole adventure caused by a filing error? He gives you a sly look. Historians still argue whether it was negligence or divine mischief. You roll your eyes, or try to. It ends up looking like a slow blink. The boat eases to a stop. This isn't a dock, not really. More like a bed-shaped patch of soft moss and stardust, floating just above the water. Cerberus hops off first, stretches dramatically, and flops down like a collapsing tent. End of the line, Hades says gently. For tonight. You glance at the songless one. She's fading already, like breath on a mirror. Will I see you again? You ask. She shrugs, grinning. Depends what you forget next. She vanishes. The lyre is still with you, cracked, but whole. You place it beside your pillow. Pillow? When did you get a pillow? You don't remember lying down, but now you're warm and horizontal, and something is gently brushing your forehead, like fingers made of music. Close your eyes, Hades murmurs. Why? Because the best endings are heard, not seen. You oblige. The world goes dim. Soft footfalls retreat. Cerberus lets out one last huff, like a snoozing dog reacting to a phantom squirrel. You sink, not into fear, not into the river Lethe, but into a sleep so deep, even dreams hesitate to disturb it. And somewhere far away, just beyond memory, the lost lullaby is still playing. You are still. The water of the Lethe laps gently beside you, but the boat is long gone. You lie nestled in something softer than moss, lighter than air. A bed spun from old stories and the half-remembered warmth of bedtime kisses. Cerberus snores softly nearby, each of his heads twitching slightly in dream. You wonder if dogs dream in triplicate. Above you, the stars will slowly, as if painted by a tired but patient hand. They don't shine so much as glow, their light soft and syrupy. Somewhere high overhead, Pegasus drifts by in slow motion, doing lazy barrel rolls like an airborne otter. You take a breath. It tastes like honey and smoke and the scent of just fallen rain. Hades is gone, or maybe not. You feel the weight of his cloak in the air, heavy with centuries, but his presence is as indistinct as the line between story and sleep. The only sound now is the river humming quietly to itself in a language you almost, but don't quite, understand. Then, a rustle. Someone sits down beside you. You turn your head, slowly, like the axis of a very sleepy planet, and see a figure made entirely of ink and parchment. Their face is a swirl of ancient calligraphy. Their robe is a first edition scroll. You know without knowing that this is myth, the living form of every tale ever whispered in torchlight or scribbled in the margins of a philosophy lecture. I've seen your type before, myth says, voice made of feather quills and forgotten rhymes. The skeptical ones. You come in mocking, stay for the talking dog, and end up caring about the nymphs. You say nothing. You're too busy absorbing the fact that myth's eyebrows appear to be actual quotation marks. Still, myth continues. You followed the trail. You let yourself listen. That's more than most. Most people just want the juicy stuff. Heroes, betrayals, Zeus turning into a swan and ghosting mortals. But you, they lean in. You cared about Cerberus. You cared about the quiet ones. You made it all the way to the edge of the river sleep. You blink. This is a real place? Oh, very real. But only if you believe in boring myths. The ones that don't get adapted into big-budget movies. They hand you something, a small, battered collar. A name tag dangles from it. It reads, Serbi, please return if found. Reward, eternal loyalty and extremely loud snoring. You smile, then you frown. What happens now? Myth leans back, cradling a storybook made from shadows. Now you let go. Of what? Everything. The plot, the questions, the noise. You let your mind float the way Persephone's lanterns do during spring festival. Upward, slow, and full of peace. A breeze stirs the leaves nearby, each one carrying a whisper of something forgotten. A lullaby sung to a clay doll, a prayer scrawled on the back of a grocery list, a promise made to a childhood imaginary friend. You sigh, the kind of sigh that empties your chest of tension like a tide retreating from shore. Will I remember this? Maybe, Myth shrugs. But even if you don't, you'll feel the shape of it. The way a hug leaves an echo. The way a dream leaves warmth on your pillow. The stars dim a little more. The world softens around the edges, as though the entire myth is being tucked into bed. You hear one last joke in the distance, probably Hermes doing shadow puppets for bored ghosts. Someone laughs. It might be you. Your eyes close, and the world quiets, but not in the way of endings. More like exhaling. More like the final page of a book being read not aloud, but into your bones. And now, as the final echoes of this strange little myth settle into the silence, your body drifts heavier still. The river is gone. The nymphs are quiet. The gods have folded their stories away like summer bedsheets. Even Cerberus, once so loud and twitchy, lies curled in a dream of chasing stars that always stay just out of reach. Your limbs soften. Your breath evens out. You are no longer floating, but settled, anchored not in thought or place, but in pure, welcome stillness. No questions remain here. No to-do lists. No need to figure out what happens next, because next is already unfolding. Gently, slowly, like a candle burning without a rush to reach the wick's end. You can almost feel the story closing around you, not with a snap, but a hush. A soft click as the book returns to the shelf of sleep, where other tales wait, of quiet emperors, tired gods, kind ghosts, and mysteries that never ask to be solved. Let your thoughts dissolve like mist on morning stone. Let your breath carry you further inward, deeper into calm. And if some small part of your mind still wanders, still clutches at images or meanings, let it go. Let it fade. Because this is the place between stories. The pause, the cradle, the hush. You are here now. You are safe. You are resting. Sleep well, dear listener.